Welcome to Waite Campus. I'm Vinay Page Lei Chen in mechanical engineering. I'm a viticulturist, and we're located here. We're situated at the Coombe Vineyard. Is the name of the vineyard. Coombe Vineyard is a very, I guess, traditional part of this campus, but also a very important part for some of our teaching. Just showing you where we are located. So this is kind of a map. The X here, maybe the contrast is not that good, but there's a red X, which is the southeast corner of the vineyard. North is in the direction of the city. West is where the ocean is. So hopefully, if you're visiting, have a chance to go out to the beach. And there's some beautiful beaches in South Australia. The Coombe Vineyard, where we are today, is an important part of our research and teaching in the University of Adelaide Waite Campus for our wine students. This is a vineyard that was planted in the mid-1990s, 1996, by a very well-known viticulturist, somebody who studies and researches wine grapes and grapes in general, Brian Coombe. Brian Coombe used to work at CSIRO, which is our national agricultural organization and science organization. We have their offices and research labs here on this campus. And unfortunately, he passed away, I think it was in 2010 or so. I wasn't here then. But this vineyard was named after him because he did some very important research in grapes and wine. And also contributed to some of the teaching on this campus. So the vineyard was planted in around 1996, and it is a vineyard of roughly 4 hectares. There is a second vineyard just on the other side of this building. When we go to the next stop, you'll be going up a small hill. On the left side, you might see a vineyard. That vineyard also has a small orchard with citrus trees, apples, almonds, figs, macadamia. There's some other crops as well. And not really used very heavily for teaching, but mostly for research. This is the vineyard we use for research and for teaching. So we bring our students here every year, and they learn about how grapes grow, what they look like, what are the diseases, what are the pests, different types of grasses that are growing, things like that. And they also track the development of the grapevine throughout the growing season. So we use this quite significantly. What else can I tell you? So we are in this, the location is Adelaide, of course, and Adelaide has a Mediterranean climate. Mediterranean climate is characterized by generally cooler to mid-warm summers, not very hot summers, but moderately warm, but dry summers, and cool and wet winters, typically. Now, with climate change, unfortunately, the winters are getting more dry, less wet. We've been seeing in the last 10 years or so that the winter rainfall is getting less. So as a result, the grapevines actually start developing earlier, and we become more reliant on irrigation. We need to apply irrigation earlier because the winter rainfall is not enough. So the soil is quite dry. And this year actually has been quite dry. You can see sometimes you see grass, but if you actually just dig a little bit deeper, it's quite dry, just even a centimeter or so. So we're calling it a green drought because there's a bit of grass, but if you scratch the surface, there's not much moisture. The soil type is generally, it's got 2 layers. The first, about 50 to 60 centimeters, is a clay loam, which is a medium weight sand mixed with clay, so not that heavy. But then below 80 centimeters is a very heavy clay. And the heavy clays can absorb a lot of moisture. Okay, so essentially, if it's a good winter rainfall year, we don't have to irrigate because the clay can absorb lots of moisture and then release that moisture to the vine. So actually, that's quite nice. I think I've told you a little bit about the climate, the soil types. We're going to just see a few slides, and then we'll walk into the row and we'll see some vines, and I'll show you some technology in a second. All right. So if you have any questions, just let me know. It's pretty informal. So I'll show you some imagery of our vineyard. I know there's a bit of reflection here, so it might be a little bit hard to see very precisely, but this is the kind of image that you would get from one of these drones, these unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. In fact, this is an image that was not taken from a UAV. This was actually taken from an aircraft that was flying. And you can see this on Google Maps. If you use Google Earth, Google Maps, this is the kind of imagery you see on Google Maps or Google Earth. That actually comes from airplanes, small planes that fly with cameras. What we can also see about our vineyard here is, again, the type of soil. I told you there was 2 layers. You can see that this is a little bit darker layer, which gets more water. This is a bit of a lighter layer, so you have this duplex soil. And we can use specialized technology to map the soils of the vineyard. That's very important when we are planting a new vineyard, because we want to know what the soil type is. And if the soil type is different, we need to change the variety, or we need to prepare the soils in special ways. For example, adding calcium or gypsum, or there are different things that we need to do. These are maps of what they call electrical conductivity, and it measures the salinity of the soil. Salts are a big problem in Australia because sometimes we irrigate with salty water from the Murray River, and the salt levels tend to build up in our soils. Not in this vineyard. We don't use Murray water because this is in the city. We use city water. It's very clean. And essentially it's showing us that there are some areas that have a little bit more salt and some areas that have a little bit less salt. So a little bit more salty in that direction, down that slope, less salty over here. But actually the numbers are very, very low salt. It's not a problem for us because we don't use river water, which tends to be salty, especially in dry years. All right, so we see these nice patterns of salt levels in the soil. Now, the way we can measure these salts and other things, for example, the soil moisture. So for example, if we're trying to irrigate our grapevines, we're trying to apply water, we can measure the soil moisture using these kinds of probes. All right, so essentially this is a probe that has 1, 2, 3, 4 sensors, and it's about 1 meter in length, 1.2 I think this one is exactly. And you can put this in the ground. We're going to actually see one installed just in a sec. And each of these give you a measurement of soil moisture, how much water is in the soil, temperature of the soil, because temperature is a very important determinant of root development, how the roots grow and how much they can grow. Too hot, they don't like it. Too cold, they don't like it. So there's some optimum temperature, and also the salt level in the soil, which is really important as well, especially in some areas around the Murray River in the inland parts of Australia, which are irrigating sometimes with the salty water of the river. All right. This year is not so bad, but in some years it's quite salty. So this is actually called a triple sensor. This is made not by us, it's made by a company from Adelaide called Centech. Centech is probably the world leader in soil moisture sensing. And they're located just probably about 5 kilometers just north of here, close to the city. So they're leaders in soil moisture sensing, but they can also measure soil temperature. They can measure electrical conductivity, which is a measure of salinity. So that's really important. These are sensors that are sold all over the world for many kinds of crops, not just for grapes. All right, and you might see this in your country as well. So that's essentially a soil moisture sensor. So the data that you get from this soil moisture sensor looks something like this. I don't know, it's maybe a bit hard to see. But you can see that each sensor gives you a line, right? Each of the 4 sensors give you a line. The top one is moving up and down, then the bottom ones are moving a bit less. So where we apply irrigation or rainfall, you get to see a spike, and then it dries, and then you irrigate, and then it dries, and so on and so forth. And then this is actually the total of all the 4 sensors are added up, and it gives you a value. And so what you can see here is when we irrigate a grapevine, a vineyard, typically in Australia, especially for red grapes, making good quality wine, we have lots of soil moisture in the beginning of the year, like now. We're getting close to flowering, so we need to have full moisture. And then when we get past flowering and fruit set, we start to apply some stress. We reduce the moisture in the soil, and that makes better quality wine for red grapes. So when we say this wine is very expensive, probably they did this. They started with very high soil moisture, and they started drying out the soil because it concentrates more flavors and aroma compounds in the grape. So red grapes, premium, high quality, generally you have some stress, water stress created by less soil moisture anywhere in the world. That's the standard practice. And then after the harvest, they fill the soil moisture again and get ready for next year. And then you have rainfall in the winter as well. Okay? So that's how this soil moisture sensor is used to drive the irrigation decision. Does it make sense? Yeah? Cool. So for white grapes, we don't actually apply too much stress. We generally want higher yields, so these lines can stay quite high. But for red grapes, we would like to have a little bit of water stress to have more flavor, to increase the quality of the grape, and therefore we can charge more for the wine as well. The wines are more expensive. So if you don't have the right flavor compounds in the grape, then we cannot do anything in the winery. The winery cannot make it better. So the best quality grapes, wines come from the best quality grapes. And that's one of the strategies to make a high quality wine, high quality grapes. Does it make sense? Yeah. So that's the way these soil moisture sensors are used. And they give you continuous data on your phone, on your computer. You can go anywhere in the world and track your devices. What we can do now is just walk into the vineyard for maybe 5 minutes, and I'll show you the soil moisture sensor where it's installed, and I'll show you a plant sensor as well.
Professor,
Yeah.
what do you do with drone?
I'm going to talk, we'll come back. It's coming. Yeah, that's the next.
Okay,
Yeah,
the
coming.
next
Yeah, I'll show you some stuff
For
about the
this
drone
size
as well.
of the vineyard, how many of the sensor you need to put?
Very good question. You know, I showed you a map in the beginning, right? I showed you a map. That's a great question. This one here. Can you see there's like different zones? So at least one sensor per color, at least. Yeah, and then you can manage the irrigation in each region in a different way based on that. Cool. That's a great question, yeah. Okay, let's have a walk in. You can just follow me. If you can, if you look at the leaves, just have a look at the shape of the leaf on both sides. Can you see any differences? Does it look similar? But is it the same? If anyone can tell me the difference, you might be able to fly the drone. That's the prize. They look very similar, and in fact, it's part of the same family, but they're not the same. The leaves are slightly different. But if anyone can tell me what the difference is, just look. It would be fantastic.
They look more lobes, maybe. They go in a bit further.
You got it. That's it. So at least one person has the answer. You get a flight. All right, you can come closer. You can come to this side. So that's the soil moisture sensor installed in the vineyard. We've got 6 of these that are going along a transect from the top to the bottom. This side of the vineyard is a little bit higher. You can see that side is lower. So when the irrigation is applied, this area always has less moisture in the soil because it drains, it goes down in that direction. Those vines are always more vigorous. They have bigger canopies, more leaves, better water status. So it's very hard to get some stress down there. So these sensors here are the Centec EnviroScans, the one I showed you with some cockroaches. And you can see that they've got a battery pack, and they've got a PCB, a printed circuit board that has a SIM card that transmits live data to their cloud, essentially. And then we can access the data of this sensor in real time. Every 10 minutes, this is transmitting data day and night. That's the beauty of this. The advantage of these sensors is that it's in the ground, so it doesn't interfere with some tractors and machines, things like that. And they get real-time data of temperature, moisture in the soil, and salinity. Okay, so that's actually a triple sensor, and it's fantastic. And it goes down to about 1.2 meters. They have sensors that are short, like 50 centimeters. They have sensors that are 10 meters. Okay, so we don't need 10 meters here. Our soils are primarily 1.5 meters or less in depth. Yeah, the roots, it depends on how you irrigate, but typically with the drip irrigation systems here, they're 50 to 80 centimeters at most. They tend to stay in the top part where the water reaches from the drip system. But if you have very light, shallow soils, they can go down. Like, for example, in Bordeaux and stuff like that, they're 30 meters. Because they're gravelly soils and they don't irrigate, so the roots have to go hunting for water. And they go down 30 meters deep. It's fantastic in Bordeaux. So they say, oh, we don't have to irrigate our vines. But the reality is the vines' roots have found the water already. And that's why they don't have to irrigate.
Is that why the red wine is more salty?
The salty, you mean? Or
Smell of the salt.
oh,
Soil.
yeah, no,
It's different to the Australian wine.
yeah, and sometimes Australian wines can also taste salty. If you irrigate with salty water, your wine can taste salty. It should not. That's not a good sign, actually. That's a wine problem. It's a fault. It should be a fault, that salt. We don't want salty wines generally. And we tell our students, make sure.
I mean soil, smell of the soil.
Oh, the soil. I see. Yeah.
Because if you drink a French wine,
Yes.
it tastes a bit
The
different.
terroir, they say.
Yeah.
It's the combination of the soil
Yeah.
and the climate and other things that bring in.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's because we're old country, old wine.
I haven't worked in wineries in France, but I can tell you that from Germany, I used to work in the Mosel Valley, and we used to have vineyards with the same Riesling, with different types of rock, like schist and different kinds of soil, essentially, but from different rocks. And the wine was completely different in the same climate. So there is definitely some interaction effect of the soil type and the composition of the soil and also the wine quality. Absolutely, you're right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So I'm sure in Bordeaux it's the same way.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. The other sensor here is, and I'll show you the data. It's a new technology. Soil moisture sensors are good, and it's an older technology and very widely used. However, it doesn't necessarily always reflect where the roots are, because the roots could be away from the soil moisture sensor and could be getting water from 30 meters. Our soil moisture sensor is only 1 meter, let's say, right? So this is actually a plant moisture sensor. Instead of soil moisture, plant moisture. So it's got two little cameras here. You can see this. Infrared, so it measures the leaf temperature. Just like COVID, we're measuring the temperature of our body. Same thing, we have an infrared sensors here on both sides looking down at two vines. And we're measuring the leaf temperature on average of all the leaves on the surface here. From this leaf temperature, we can say if the vine has water stress or has good amount of irrigation. If there's not enough water, the plant's leaves become hot. They stop losing water. The leaves are actually transpiring. They're actually moving water out now to cool themselves. But if there's water stress, the leaves start getting hot. So please touch the leaf now. If you use the back of your hand, it's even more sensitive. So use the back of your hand to touch the leaf surface. And is it cool or is it hot? Cool, which means enough water. If it starts feeling hot, that means there's water stress. You need to apply irrigation. So this is measuring exactly the temperature to tell us whether to irrigate or not.
During the day, or I mean, all day.
Usually during the day, because at night the leaves do not move much water. They open when the sun comes out. They start moving water when the sun comes out. So we need to look at it during the middle of the day when there's lots of light. Come out here, touch the leaf. Any plant, even in your house, you can touch the leaf. If it's hot, you need to apply some irrigation, even in your house, not just grapevines. So this is just measuring the temperature with infrared. And we tell the farmers, the growers, please irrigate, how much ever, some volume, we give them some number. So this is also continuous every 15 minutes. We have data to the cloud. And now we're selling these sensors in New Zealand, Australia, and in California. So this is a new technology from our campus, from my lab. Infrared sensing of plant temperature and water stress. Okay, good. So anyone, one person got the right answer about the difference between Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon. Anyone else? Yeah, sorry, your question.
No, actually, I'm wondering what's the answer actually. So you're asking someone.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I still can't
No idea. Okay. Anyone? Cabernet, let's look at Cabernet Franc first, maybe easier. So Cabernet Franc, I'm just going to remove two leaves, maybe easier. It's very different. It looks similar, but quite different. Maybe if I put them next to each other, you can see the difference.
Big one and smaller one, or no?
No, not the size.
How many cloves?
Color, yeah, color maybe a little bit, but not.
It's just this part that is.
Yeah, that's the key.
Oh, that's the one.
This has deep
Oh wow.
lobes. Can you see that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the difference. Yeah, and you can tell it's a Cabernet. And also Cabernet Franc has more like wrinkles, and usually a little bit darker. But that's not always the case. The lobing is more important, and Cabernet Franc has less. This one has much more. Also, if you see the shoot tip, the top of the shoot, the younger leaves are like bronze color to red color. Cabernet Franc, not so much. Not so dark. This is much darker, pink and bronze. So you can tell the difference also. And yeah, and when the grapes are, so right now we're at flowering. This is the flowering stage. Flowering means that,
Stressing this?
sorry?
Is it when you start stressing it?
Exactly. Just after this stage. Maybe after next week onwards, we're going to start reducing the water. So this is the flowering stage. And Cabernet Franc typically flowers about 1 to 2 weeks before Cabernet Sauvignon. This is a bit later. That's a little bit earlier. So if you're in a cold climate, you'll prefer Cabernet Franc because it ripens earlier. If you're in a hot climate, you want this one because it's a bit later. Yeah. Both are Bordeaux varieties. Okay, Cabernet Sauvignon more famous in Napa Valley as well. But Cabernet Franc is also one of the Bordeaux varieties. Cool.
Are they wind pollinated or are they self-fertile?
Self-fertile.
Yeah.
Self-fertile, luckily, not like the almonds. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, these are all self-fertile. Selected
So you won't get
specifically. Specifically selected for their
That's pretty much all
perfect flowers.
wine grapes.
All of wine grapes. All selected for perfect flowers. Exactly, exactly. In the wild, they'll be hermaphroditic. Yeah, either one or the other. Yeah. Cool. So they're starting to flower, you can see.
Do we need
The grape flower doesn't smell very nice, unfortunately. It's not like roses and
Do
things.
we need to rip up the leaves or something?
They do some manipulations of the canopy. If it starts getting very dense and crowded, it's good to have some light going into the canopy. If there's too many shoots and leaves, they do remove some leaves and shoots after a few weeks. They will try and add more light to the interior of the canopy. That increases the quality of the grapes. Exactly. Great point. That's a great point. Yeah. So you can see that this is a standard drip irrigation system. There's different kinds of cover crops here on the floor, mostly legumes and some grasses, native grasses. The irrigation, normally they're putting in this vineyard, every vineyard is different, depends on the climate and the variety. This vineyard is getting typically about 500,000 liters of water, half a megaliter, per hectare. So I said this vineyard is about 4 hectares. So we're using about 2 million liters of water for this whole vineyard per year. Per year, so within 5 or 6 months.
Professor,
That's typically.
question, do we need to have fertilizers during?
The fertilizers are put on through the drip system, liquid form, yeah, in most of the vineyards. Sometimes they use like compost. Some organic vineyards and other vineyards are using compost. Our soils actually have a lot of fertilizer. They don't need too much. But if you're growing a lot of fruit, like maybe harvesting a large amount of grapes, a lot of tons, then you need to apply extra fertilizers. These soils are quite good in terms of fertilizer. We apply compost and that's it. But if you're producing a lot of crop, like for example in Riverland and places like that, they harvest 20, 30, 40 tons per hectare of grapes. Then they need to apply extra fertilizer through the drip system. We call it fertigation, fertilizer plus irrigation, fertigation. So they apply through the drip system weekly. Yeah, those plants need.
How old are these?
1996,
So since 1996. So
mature vines. Yeah.
Right, mature.
Yeah.
So it's always, would it always more mature trees will make a better wine, or?
Very good question. I have a PhD student asking that question right now because that's controversial. What we believe is that the older vines do make better wine. But the reason is that they have a smaller canopy with more light and also smaller amount of fruit, less tons. And so they have reached a balance of leaves and fruit. Younger vines produce too much of this and not enough of the crop. And they're out of balance, so the quality of the wine is lower because of that. If we can manage that by doing what you said, removing some leaves and stuff, we can make a good quality wine just like the old wines. But the old vines have automatically self-regulated. The leaf area to fruit weight, that's called crop load, we call it in technical terms. And that balance of leaf, fruit, and root is in equilibrium for the older vines. And that's why I think they're making better wine.
So when you say older, is that more than 50 years?
So we have this in the question research project right now. We have some vines 10 years old, some 25. We have some 110. We have some that are 70. We're finding that above 30 years, it starts to be quite good. But more than 70 years is not, it starts to go down. And the yield goes down a lot. It doesn't become economically profitable when the vine gets really old. It makes a good wine, but not profitable. But 30, 35 years is at least initial results. I cannot say too much more because they're still initial, preliminary results. But we're finding that the young vines are not good and the old, really old ones are also not that great because of yield decline.
I got a term like old world and new world of wine.
Yeah.
Is that different in terms of producing
The
good,
style.
good or kinds of good wine?
Yeah, I think now that's changing a lot. I think now every country can produce some of the best wines in the world. Every country, it's changing because we learned how to grow these grapes. Yeah, so it depends more on the knowledge of the viticulturist and the winemakers coming together. Yeah, your experience. I think we can grow grapes, really good grapes, almost anywhere in the world now. I mean, in the climate that allows the grapes to grow. Yeah, if we
So
go,
the
yeah.
British one like Pembroke Grange and all that. So is the trees much older?
We worked in some Grange vineyards in my research many years ago, about 10 years ago now. And the vines are not necessarily older, but they have more stress.
Okay.
That's what I was showing you. The line goes down. They keep that line down for a long time. Dehydrating. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what it does, it also keeps this less.
Yes.
Automatically reduces the shoot area and the leaf area.
But you can hire someone to trim it, right?
But not good because you're wasting time and money trimming. That costs money. It's not the best. The best is to just reduce the irrigation a little bit. It's easier. And then and they do that in the Grange vineyards, for example.
So what are really the enemies of wine growing?
Sorry?
The enemies or kinds of obstacles or problems of growing wine?
The difficulties.
Yeah,
The challenges are, of course, the climate. The heat waves are a big problem in Australia, especially southern Australia. We have sudden increases of temperature above 40 Celsius for 3, 4, 5 days. And that can shrivel the berries and change the quality. It becomes actually really bad. It tastes like port, which you don't want in a wine. Very jammy and alcoholic and porty.
So,
Port, like port wine from Portugal. Fortified wines. And you don't want that taste in a normal wine. And the challenges of disease are always there when we have lots of rainfall, especially in the spring, You can have a disease. Last year we had this fungal diseases like downy mildew. And recently we had a very bad frost, very cold temperatures, less than 0 degrees, when the green shoots were already out, emerged. And that killed a lot of vineyards in Barossa Valley, in Riverland. This year, there was one last year as well. So about 1/3 of the vineyards in Barossa Valley, maybe some of you have been there, just 1 hour north, they lost a lot of vines because there was a frost about 3-4 weeks back. So that's one of the hazards, one of the biggest problems for viticulture here is frost. Not in this vineyard, this is not too cold, but Barossa gets quite cold. Yeah, so these are the challenges. But disease, we know how to manage. We spray the vines with some fungicides. We know how to manage insects. So I think viticulture is not that difficult. But you need to know what to do at the right time. At the right time. Timing is everything. Yeah.
Do you find you get similar yields each year? Or like what do you
In this vineyard, it's managed pretty uniformly. So yeah, I would say yes. But it depends on if there's a heat wave, then the yield suddenly can shrink by 1/3. You can lose berry size by 1/3. So yield can drop depending on some climate-related aspects. If it's very salty water you're irrigating with, if it builds up over a few years, lying on creek and stuff, you can actually start to see yield declines over time. So, but typically not. Yeah, typically not. Yeah.
How much wine does this vineyard produce each year?
No, I don't know the exact number, but generally speaking, I would say this sort of vineyard with 0.5 megaliter might be producing about 10 tons per hectare. So 10 tons might give you maybe 6,000 to 7,000 liters of wine per hectare. So that's about 4 hectares. So let's say 30,000 liters, something like that, just roughly. White grapes are a little bit more, red grapes are a bit less. So it just depends on the sort of grape. Yeah. The quality is quite good. If you have time to go to the winery, there's also many, like 30, 40 different wines to try from this vineyard. We probably have about 70 or 80 different types of grape varieties here. And they all have different shapes and sizes and different maturation rate and things like that. So we teach our students about that. It's quite interesting. Should we go over there? Any questions? We'll keep talking. I don't want you to run out of time. The buggies will be chasing me.
So you say 10 tons per hectare.
We can talk.
How many liters would that convert to?
I think if it's red grapes, maybe 6,000 liters. If it's white, maybe 8,000, 7,500, something like that. So you divide that by 0.75, divide by 12 for the cases. Yeah.
All right.
So you can get the number of bottles or the cases, divide by 12 and divide by 0.75. So, yeah, you can have a seat with just 5 more minutes and we finish. I'm happy to answer questions. We'll talk about the drones as well. This is the kind of data. I said the soil moisture sensors have some limitations because it's not measuring where the roots are. The vine sensors can measure how the vine is doing, the temperature of the vine, right? So we talked about that. So when you apply irrigation, the vine gets cooler and the water status improves of the vine. You can have a seat. If the air gets hotter, the vine gets more stressed. If you apply soil moisture, the vine gets more moisture and it's less stressed. So the plant can actually tell us a lot about how much moisture is happening or it's getting, and also telling us something about how the environmental conditions, the air temperature is affecting the plant water stress. So that's the benefit of using the plant sensor compared to the soil moisture. So other things I'll just show you quickly, just hopefully you don't have to leave very quickly. Now we move from ground-based measurements to aerial measurements. Remote sensing, we call it, measuring from the sky. Okay, so we can use many different types of platforms. So we have 2 different drones over here. This one is one we use not that often, but we at least use it 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. I don't know. Depends on the projects. It's a DJI drone. It's a Chinese company that's probably the most successful Chinese drone company in the world, not just Chinese. And they make some fantastic drones. So this is a DJI drone platform, a heavy lifting platform. It can carry up to 25 kgs total weight, including itself. There are normally 6 batteries in here. The batteries are very heavy. So I haven't got the batteries in here, but they would have 6 batteries. Normally one controlling every one of these propellers. The payload, extra weight it can carry is in the order of about 6 to 7 kgs. This one has 3 different cameras. The first camera is just a standard camera, RGB camera that you can use for yourself. 44 megapixel Sony camera, just taking red, green, blue images, just like your smartphone, standard camera. This one is, the red color camera is called a multispectral camera. The multispectral camera is measuring also RGB, red, green, and blue, just like we see from our eyes. but also it captures near infrared, which means we can't see. So for example, if these plants, these vines have some disease, this camera can see the disease in the wavelengths of light that we cannot see. So we use this for disease detection, seeing the disease before we can see it. This camera here is just like the plant sensor. It's measuring the leaf temperature. So we can fly and measure the water status of the entire vineyard by measuring the temperature of the leaves with the thermal camera, infrared camera. This is another small DJI, which is really nice. We have 5 or 6 of these drones, different kinds, but I brought 2 out for the demonstration today. This has a Hasselblad camera. Hasselblad is probably the best camera in the world. And this camera is just as good in terms of quality as this big Sony camera. But this drone is much easier to fly, and it flies much longer as well. So if you don't need to have the multispectral and the thermal, then this camera is actually fantastic. And I use this a lot for mapping, for surveying, things like that. Very easy to carry. It has a very small bag, and it's easy to fly, and it's $2,000, very cheap. This rig is probably more than $100,000, this sitting here. We have other rigs, another system here that has hyperspectral. The camera is 80,000 plus the drone. That's more than 150,000 then. So you can spend a lot of money, but you don't need to. You can actually do a lot with very high quality but low cost drones as well. Depends on what you're trying to do. So this is actually fantastic. And I have one like this at home as well for just personal use. When we move from drone to satellite images, we see some maps like this. That's hard to see, I know. Sorry about the reflection. This is actually the same kind of information coming from the satellite. The resolution of each of these boxes here, I know it's hard to see, but if you can see these boxes, is 10 meters by 10 meters from satellite imagery. We're using satellites more now because we can see what's happening around the world in vineyards, on farms, in any 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Yeah, perfect. I'll finish and then we'll have the tractor demo. And you can see what happens over the season. So this is a parameter that measures the stress, the color of the leaves. The darker the color, the more healthy the plants are. That's this index here called NDVI. You can see in the beginning of the season, like now, the leaves are very green. By the end of the season, March, you can see it change from green to yellow. So we know the plants are getting stressed because it's getting hot and it's late in the season. The vines are getting tired. We can capture this information from satellite imagery. The last thing is, this is the cool part for me, I think, is we have a radar on one of the satellites. And the radar can actually measure the soil moisture. Very cool, right? So when you see more blue color, also 10 meters, there's more soil moisture in the ground from the satellite. It's fantastic, not just the vine. You can see this is the road here. There's a road behind us. That's the road here, yellow, no soil moisture. Okay, so we can actually see from satellites what's happening in the ground as well. And that's called synthetic aperture radar. It's a radar on one of the European satellites. I think Lei, we're ready. We have a few more minutes. If Lei is going to do an autonomous tractor demonstration, I'll tell you something about autonomous tractors as it drives by. If you guys can maybe move slightly to this side or near the fence, it's okay. I'll move the chairs. And you can stand on this side. Feel free to ask questions. And we'll be around later on for the reception. If you have more questions, we can talk later. So autonomous vehicles are becoming more prevalent, more widespread in farming systems around the world because, especially in Australia, we have shortages of labor. Very hard to find people who can work and also not complain. They don't complain, these tractors, right? They just do whatever you tell them. And they also can operate day and night. Let's see how it probably has a short range radar, so it shouldn't. It's fantastic. It doesn't have to reverse. So we're starting to see more of these autonomous robots for picking fruit, for putting cameras and checking what's happening in the vines. This particular system has can you see the thing at the back, the rig? It has a soil coring device, so it can core down to 0.5 meter and measure the soil properties like soil carbon. It has a sensor at the end of that coring rig. So it actually punches a hole 0.5 meter deep, and in each it stops, punches a hole, measures the soil carbon, goes to the next location, punches a hole, measures soil carbon in situ. And you can do almost anything with this sort of thing, day or night, which is fantastic. That's something else the radar also can do, the satellite imagery.
Future food food from the past. So this Agritech innovation is about taking traditional knowledge from tens of thousands of years and bringing it into the modern kitchen, bringing it into modern foods and making it very acceptable to everybody's palates. These foods have a stronger flavour often than the foods that we're used to because they are still very natural and very undomesticated. And so they taste a little bit different and a bit confronting sometimes, but that's not to say none of these are confronting. These are all really good, right? Okay. But sometimes some of the flavours, when you find native food ingredients in the supermarkets, they will be really strong and you only need a tiny little bit to get the flavour. Otherwise, it's overwhelming because we've had a palate that's sanitised to sugar and fat and not much else. I'll just go back to my script, tend to go off script a bit, right? So within Australia, it's estimated that there are over 5,000 plants that have been used as foods, medicines and tools and utensils by the First Nations people of Australia over the last 60, 70,000 years. The traditional knowledge from these people, from years of understanding of being on country and working with the plants and the environment is essential to our future sustainability of Australia. We can work together, walk together to create a new range of foodstuffs using traditional knowledge and ingredients and benefit everybody in that. The research and innovation opportunities, there's so much we can do. All of these plants, yes, all of them have something amazing within them that's not just the flavour. It's a health property, it's a superfood, and we should be looking at that. We can find better ways to get more vitamins, more antioxidants than we would on our current range of food products. I've been working on Australian plants since I was quite small, and as I worked at university, my PhD was on native plants, and so I had a lack of growing and killing native plants, which is what happens when you do research on plants. You need to work out how they can be grown in a pot so that you can, and the glasshouse, so you can do research on them. Here are some examples of plants that are thriving and plants that are not doing quite so well. So we have a lot of work to do with this particular plant to make it happy, but the others are looking pretty good. And we like to work with Yandimara and Jalen, you work out in the nursery, don't you, to find out, get the knowledge from them, how to connect to these plants and make them grow well. I love plants. Plants are my thing. Animals are also good, but my preference is plants. And so I like to make them grow well. And I really want to enhance the way these plants are grown in cultivations. But what do they need to grow? This is what we need to find out. And how do we fit them into our kitchens? Okay, native food plants have been around for a really long time, but also in research they've been around for a little while. This is the top 13 plants that have been researched up till now. These are the main ones. You will find most of these in commercial supply. But there are a whole back locker, as Yandamara puts it. These are the easy ones, the front of the locker. Pull them out. There's the ones that are behind, tucked away down the back, behind the expired flour that we need to get to and introduce them into our kitchens and into our food production systems. So they are what we're going to talk about today. Two of those plants, the Bacchausia citrodora and Syzygium lilipili, are on that list. We've got them here, but the other two myrtles, cinnamon myrtle and aniseed myrtle, are new. Quick run through of the 4 key ingredients that we have brought in today. Lily pillies. How many of you grow lily pillies at home? You do have it? You're all from Hong Kong, China? You haven't got Syzygium's lily pillies yet? It's an opportunity. Well, you can't, come to Australia and see lily pillies. These are the lily pilly fruits. Most people don't realise that the lily pillies, which we grow as a hedge plant, actually have edible little fruits. Okay. No, I need to. Well, you can taste these when we break, but you have them in China already?
Yeah, in Thailand.
Thailand, is it? Lily pillies or just a similar fruit? I'm surprised that you don't have them yet. But there's also, Syzygium is not just exclusive to Australia, but also Syzygium comes from a number of other countries as well.
Good lads.
Yeah, that was, yeah. So we have a lot of species of Syzygium, and this particular one is called the lilipili that we're using as a bush fruit. At the moment, there are others. There are blue fruits, there are white fruits. Aniseed myrtle, that's this one, isn't it? The sorry, poor little sad one, which I must give more love to, tastes like aniseed. So that is an alternative to, where does aniseed normally come from, guys? Licorice? Licorice? Yep. Sambucus? Fennel? Fennel? Yeah. Licorices. So this is a tree that grows in the rainforest areas of New South Wales and Queensland. Super high antioxidant profile. You know, there's not domesticated, so there's still got the good stuff in them, right? Whereas a lot of our highly cultivated plants are losing that ability to give us those key nutrients because we've made them taste so nice. Those things are in them because they wanted to stop the insects from eating them. So the more stress they have in their lives, the better amount of those antioxidants and vitamins and phenolics that they're going to have. So we've got to stop treating our plants nicely, like that one. Not treating it nicely. And then we have the very popular, very commonly those, Menahundacho, Robert Abrahams, Zachazi Suchidora, smells the most amazing lemon smell. Here's some fresh leaves that I've got real locally. Is our use for tea, very commonly used made up tea. It's a really good lemon. It smells like lemon.
And we'll keep it the cold years.
Yeah, it's a citronella lemon, like you use for mosquitoes. So it has a good smell, and it's used for a lot of cooking. Tangy leaves. It actually grows pretty well here in South Australia, which is a dry climate, even though it comes from the more humid environment of New South Wales, Queensland. All right, I have to talk about some sort of sciencey stuff. If you want more sciencey stuff, not so much plant stuff. I'll get my right hat on, put the periodic table of foods hat on. So, even though the human race has been feeding itself for a really long time, we've narrowed our focus down to 3 key crops. 80% of our food comes from rice, wheat and corn. And that's really scary from a food production point of view, because if anything really goes wrong with the supply chains, the production of those foods, we're going to have worldwide famine. And that's tried to be ameliorated by having stockpiles of those ingredients. But if something goes wrong for too many years, we will lose it. But there are tens of thousands of plants out there that have been feeding First Nations people across the world for tens of thousands of years that nobody knows very much about except for those people. And collaboratively, we should all be working together to make those ingredients more available to everybody, to bring sustainability and food security back into the human race, right? Instead of focusing just on those top 3. So this is what we call the dark matter of food. If you watch space programs, they talk about dark matter, all the stuff we don't know. This is all the stuff we haven't worked on yet for plants. I have a 13-year-old son, so I've watched a lot of science recently in the last 10 years as we've explored space, dinosaurs, Great Barrier Reef many, many times. We've done David Attenborough in the Great Barrier Reef. So I've recently watched a program about dark matter because he's kind of interested in space, which is kind of cool. Plants in space, though, not humans in space. So anyway, back to the point. So the Periodic Table of Food initiative is to provide this standardised assessment analysis of the key foods as they're grown in different countries. So very surprisingly, we don't have a standardised method of assessing the quality of our key ingredients across the whole world. Different labs in different countries use different methods, which means you can't compare the results together, which means we don't know if the wheat that's grown in Australia under certain conditions is producing the same nutritional benefits as it is in other countries, because we can't even measure it the same way. So the primary purpose of the Periodic Table of Foods is to standardise all of those assessments So that if you are checking your wheat in Australia and you're checking it in the UK and you're checking it in the US, you're using exactly the same method, and so you can compare your results. It may seem like, why do we need to do that? But it's actually really important for food producers and scientists and breeders to know that, take out that variable, we are looking at everything in exactly the same way, and we can see where the differences are coming from, and that becomes agronomic. We can also take this opportunity to look at the First Nations foods from each different country. So go back to the foods that were eaten before westernisation sort of occurred across most of the countries. So there's so many ingredients that everybody eats in their home country that we don't eat in Australia, or was not eaten in the UK, or not eaten in England, or even not eaten in China compared to what's eaten here. And we need to embrace that and start sharing that diversity a little bit more. But first we need to understand it and categorise it. That's the periodic table of food. It will be more sustainable if we understand about growing things that are more in tune with the environment, that need less resources. Why change the environment to grow a plant? Pick plants that fit into the environment. Makes more sense to me. So the standardised tools that we're looking at are all the onyx. So I can't say most of these. I can say plant. That's perfume. Proteomics, aromatics, yes, metabolomics, lipidomics. These are all word scrabble or crossword words, if you can get the letters together. Glyconics. So omics been study online thinking at a guess, focusing on some key parts of the nutritional profile and how to look at it. Australia is but one of many in this endeavour. It's a worldwide endeavour. It's an international program, and there are nodes, centres of excellence across the world. And we are in the Oceania, which is Adelaide and Fiji. So I'm hoping for an invitation to the Fiji node to spend some time there to make sure that they're doing things the way we are. It's not come yet, it may come. But as you can see from that map, there are centres of excellence in all the continents and most of the countries, and we share the knowledge between these groups about the methodologies that are being used to make sure that we can standardise everything. But also each one of their nodes has their own First Nation peoples, plants, animals, fungi, insects that they are researching. Lots of words. You can read this one. I'm not going to read it out. This is some background about how the Centre of Excellence is established, who's involved in it. It's a very Australian focus, but then Fiji and Oceania have their focus because their plants are a little bit different. We have a stakeholder group which incorporates people, First Nations people, because if we're going to be using First Nations knowledge and First Nations input, we've got to recognise it and build a framework that works for everybody, and we work in partnership and collaborate, work together to get the benefit for everybody, and acknowledge all of that deep connection to these plants that comes with being First Nation people. Not just in Australia, but all First Nations people have deep connection to country and the plants that they eat. And we have a framework. There is always the westernised method of doing things, committees, memorandums of understanding, agreements, benefit sharing, royalties, all of that comes into the mix, and we need to make sure that we embrace all of that and get it right to ensure that everybody gets acknowledged. This is primarily to show you how many of our plants we've gone to work with. So of about 1,400 that were identified, so that's just plants, animals, fungi, everything. We had narrowed that down to about 170 key ingredients that will be part of this program. That is still quite a lot, but it's still a tiny proportion of what we have available to us. But everything costs money, right? It's still a fascinating initiative, and I'm really excited to be part of it because I will get to be the one who gets to grow the plants to get that out to the labs so they can analyse this stuff. That is enough from me right now. You're really excited about tasting this food? Yes. You're getting closer and closer. I can sense this. First, I now need to introduce some of the key players. I think I've already introduced the key players, but we've got to bring Uncle Yadamara onto the floor. While James is handing out the ice cream, colleagues come forward. What do we got here? I do a MasterChef then here. It's cinnamon ice cream with a biscuit.
Yes, it's vegan friendly, cinnamon flavored ice cream. That one doesn't have crustaceans ingredients in it, but hopefully next time we'll have 7 cinnamon myrtles, and that's paired with a biscuit that James will make.
So the biscuit is a variation on an English biscuit called a jammy dodger, so a jam-filled biscuit, but it uses lily-pilly jam that's been turned into a jam curd inside the biscuit. So this fruit here, first into a jam, then into a curd. So please help this up to an ice cream and enjoy. And then we also have some biscuits, which the icing has been flavoured with the 3 different myrtles: lemon myrtle, cinnamon myrtle, and then aniseed myrtle.
Any secrets? No.
I don't just have it in any way you want.
The ice cream maybe a little earlier because it might melt. But how you want?
Yandamara is going to talk a little bit about anything that takes his fancies for these plants and to do with the world of First Nations food and country and culture and sharing. And I just want to listen to you talk, so I like listening to you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, they've done a really good job taking some of the native flavours and harder. And I'll continue on what from where Kate was speaking. And what's really fascinating, we've been involved in the journey for about 4 years now, working with the communities. My mum passed when I was younger, so I grew up traditional. I still play an Oka dance. It's a ceremony of our old people. I had the pleasure to actually travel country. People call this ushtaka or scrum. It's actually future world's foods, medicines, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, nutraceutical. And what's really exciting is when we donate people from overseas, they're not sort of as held back by the fact that plants can do medicine and the food. They use it a lot in overseas countries, and we like to go to the pharmacies and buy it at the shelf. But other cultures have realised that our plants are our medicine, and if we eat healthy foods. And what's amazing in Australia, and everyone rushes off to the Amazon rainforest, there's 2 hotspots for biodiversity in the world. One's the Amazon, the other one starts with the name, it's actually Australia. In Australia, we actually have human consumption of those plants for 100,000 years. So what it shows is these plants are safe and all to be. What I love is modern science, I call it catching up. They're doing an analysis on these plants. Just recently, it's in Australia. Traditional owners were actually able to collaborate on a little book, and I encourage you to come up and have a look at it. And the little book talks about some of the traditional uses on country, a nice little picture, and some of the flavours and aromas. The plants we talk about, and there's an old saying, healthy country, healthy people. We use that concept when we talk about plants. It sounds funny too, we look at plants like a family. There's a grandfather or grandmother, auntie, uncle, niece and nephew, the jiggy ones that leave country. We look at it with that perspective because our old people taught it about that. Those are families. So we've got an aniseed myrtle, licorice myrtle. When that's flowering, and you can't see it here, it actually gets a really bright pink leaf on it. Our younger generation, they'll go and pick one of those little pink leaves and they eat it, and it tastes like the most intense licorice lolly you've ever tried. When they do that, they actually prune the tree for us, so we get a patty yield off that tree when it comes into flower. So some of these plants have been managed for a long time. But when we look at the industries too, we've got to be smart. Chinese business bought 2.5 million lemon myrtle trees up in North Cairns, and they're supplying it. When the farmer sold it to China, he didn't tell them that that plant can actually be affected by a disease called myrtle rust. When myrtle rust hits that tree, all those plants will have to be ripped out, replanted. What's sad is someone just sold 7 to farms. They didn't give them the cultural knowledge. They didn't give them the story with that. South Australia is the only safe haven where that BDs doesn't exist. What's sad is people aren't explaining it to our friends from across the water. That these plants, some of them we can monoculture, some of them we can't. And if we do, we're going to affect the whole ecosystem. That plant was taken in Malaysia, and it became the super plant in the ecosystem. Habitats will create ways to control plants if they're not from that area, from that region. If that travelled with it's got a couple of little friends it travels with, and we know that on country, they won't actually have the problem of nerve lost. When you disconnect the traditional knowledge, that story, you're not understanding that plant, it can create industry problems in the future. What we want to do is work with the groups, put that traditional knowledge with it, the soul nice story. These plants travel from the east to the west, and as Kate pointed out, they will grow in South Australia. Through research, we're actually grafting the lemon myrtle to a myrtle from the west coast. 2 songlines fought together, and now I've got a drought-tolerant plant that's more resistant to that myrtle rust. And when we sit down and we share our ideas, we generate knowledge. So only together we can actually utilise that knowledge and become realistic for our people. These are all becoming the world's new superfoods. It's not a fad anymore. Some of these plants have got massive compounds in them. And these are the books or ways that we can educate the wider community. I used to work with Willis before it passed away as a bakery down here. And he come to me once and he said, "Young Amara, so we have flavours in Australia that are unique." And the first one I actually give them is we've got a mountain pepper, a native pepper to Australia. It's a stronger pepper flavour than the overseas pepper, and it's got a cinnamon undertone, so very complex. He tried it in his product, and it went very well, tasted a lot better, but the volume wasn't there to supply the market. We went from a 50 kilo order a week to a 5 tonne kilo order a week. What he said is the flavours in Australia are so unique and so diverse, but no one's really looked at us. And what Kate pointed out too is they're superfoods. Lemon myrtle, you only need a little bit of that on seafood, amazing flavour. We call it universal language, food, plants. We want to share that knowledge, but do it respectfully. If I take that plant without that story, without that songline, I could actually do damage if I planted in another country to that ecosystem or environment. I could create problems. When we travel with those songlines, we understand them. And I go back to that saying, healthy cunt, a healthy tick. What Kate pointed out too is this is what we call the front of the locker. A lot of people come and buy this stuff and they commercialise it. They don't have the authenticity story behind it, so a lot of that stuff that is really valuable gets hidden away. Perfect example, if we've got a plant called Gumby Gumby. About 20 years I've involved with the University of Queensland. And we've been researching that plant for years. When I was out in the bush, an old lady heard my story. She gave me a handful of leaves. Showed me that out of 10,000 plants that look identical, there's only one of those plants that has that medicine in it. When I took it to the uni, they were really excited and they did research on it. Germany's actually done 3 years of full clinical trials. As an Aboriginal person, I can't tell you that we used it to cure cancer, because we didn't have cancer in our communities, and we used it as an all-purpose medicine. But the compounds in the scientific analysis said it's got all the stuff in there to do that. The biggest problem is we've disconnected, again, from Aboriginal people. You sell it in a capsule and tell people to cure cancer. When I take medicine, I don't take one medicine. I actually, like any medicine, I take a course of medicine. If I'm not working with Aboriginal people and I tell you that that's going to kill cancer, to me that's snake oil. You're not actually telling people the proper information. What I love is science is now validating what's in these plants. Smart organisations can help us then to look at that. We want these plants to benefit the world. The secret Amazon rainforest that everyone forgets about. None of it like, hey, I love plants. Do want to share that journey. Sometimes I think we disconnect from that because we get so modern. Just walking on country and learning what we've got around us. As Kay said, this will change nutritional compounds. In any family, they talk about their environment. If I take that to a different country, what's that ecosystem going to do to that plant? They're all unknown. That's what's exciting. For our next generations, there's so many pathways for this to learn about and understand. And I encourage that happens. Some of the flavours here too, they are unique. Lemon myrtle, I'd encourage you to use that with seafood. But I'll ask this question, if I'm going to do a piece of leaf and you didn't know what to do with it, what would you look us never? It's part of that education and learnings. And what I love about other cultures and the old people, and I'll finish with this, both the grown up old men dead to the ground, make this out when I think about them on the other gen. I know a fellow said to me once, he said, "Young Lamar, no one's culture is more important than anyone else's." We forget that, even in our own country. When we understand that we respect each other. Aboriginal elders have a word there called Ngataji Ngataji. It's a language. They've asked me how to spell it. Because it's the spoken dialects. But it's about walking the journey together and looking after each other. They've got plants and medicines here that can help. We want to share that. And it's true, Bricks, like the universities and wonderful people like Kate. It allows our old people. Because she was talking earlier about some of the acronyms. And the Latin languages and the big words. If I gave my presentation in Aboriginal language, why did you not going to be all looking at me? What that allows us that language to actually be shared. But we always base it off that one principle. There's no cultures more important, and we always travel with love and respect. I'll encourage you to come up and have a try of the stuff. The last group, Kate said, we'll just...
Well, Kate's just disappeared, but I was just going to see if anyone wants any questions or if there's any questions that anyone might...
A bit of a loose gun when she said opener. You said any question? Feel free.
And also the boys have made some beautiful biscuits as well, so... Go on.
James already been swimming our food into the next generation, and one of them will be different. So come for the Arabs happening.
We have to let these beautiful people go.
Yeah, I'll talk to you over.
Hopefully, we can, I think, evict the team to stay for the next session when we're in Airbrain House to eat along the station.
Welcome everyone. I'm delighted to host you today. We are at the Plant Accelerator. This is a state-of-the-art facility at the University of Adelaide, one of very few buildings in the world that enabling us to have very precise and high throughput capturing of data of plant-soil interaction research. And I will explain some aspects of the research here, and then we go upstairs to look at some of the real-world capability that we have, enabling us to offer solutions for the future farming system. So my name is Ehsan Tawakkoli, and I'm an academic at the School of Agriculture, Food and Wine. My area of research interest is soil-plant interactions in a changing environment. And first of all, I would like to discuss the importance of why do we do research on soil anyway. On a daily basis, about 99% of our food and fiber production comes from the soil. If you look at the data that we have on the right-hand side, you can see that there is a projected increase of global population by 9 billion in 2050. And at the same time, we have a shrinking land area that is available to humans for farming. So imagine that 99% of the food coming from less available land as we go into 2050. There is a need for innovative solutions to improve the productivity of this land, and at the same time, it has to be sustainable. So that means that we shouldn't degrade the environment, and we should be very much considerate of how we increase that productivity. So the research that we do at the University of Adelaide and using facilities such as the Plant Accelerator enable us to come up with those innovative solutions. I want to put it in the context with you. The photo that you can see on the left-hand side, I took this photo in a farming system in Western Australia about 3 years ago. As a scientist, as an agronomist, when you walk into this paddock, I would estimate that this is an amazing crop and will bring that region about $20 million worth of income from the sale of the canola crop that they have by the end of the season. A few days later, that crop can transit from hero to zero. The crop on the right-hand side worth nothing. And the reason for this transition from hero to zero is hidden below the soil surface. There's a lot of problems in Australian soils. More than 70% of our soils have issues that limiting productivity. We have salinity, we've got drought stress, we have very heavy soil texture in this environment that when an event of high rainfall comes through, it prevents that water infiltration. And when the waterlogging happens, what you can see on the right-hand side here, the crop cannot survive. This year, in 2024, we are in the other spectrum of the problem. So many areas in South Australia, in mid-North SA, in Eyre Peninsula, we are dealing with severe drought conditions. And the drought conditions affecting farmers in a way that there is a prediction that there is pretty much no crop to harvest. That's how severe it is. So I want to introduce a concept of climate smart agriculture. And the climate smart agriculture is a way that we can improve the farming system by introducing solutions that farmers and the future food security can be sustained. So some of those solutions, as you can see on this PowerPoint slide, is either from improving the genetic tolerance of the crop. So just to make it clear, I'm not focusing on GM crops. This is natural selections of different varieties that we can have to select a better crop for productivity. So on a yearly basis, we do research on screening hundreds of different wheat, barley, canola, and legume crop varieties in different regions across the country to identify which one is performing better and find out why that crop is performing better. That why is very important and time consuming for us. And we come back to this facility and similar facilities to understand the details in relation to how, for example, the root system interact within that environment. So we have technologies upstairs that called X-ray computed tomography, enable us to look at interactions of roots, soil, and microbes in nanoscale. On the right-hand side, this is an example of another type of research that my team is leading in the University of Adelaide, and this is innovation in material science. We're designing new generation of organic, environmentally friendly amendments that we can apply to the soil, and those amendments are designed to improve soil health and functionality. And the future is a combination of those approaches, an emphasis on how we can improve crop productivity, and also what can we design in terms of innovative material that can improve soil microbial activity and improvement of soil physical and chemical health. So just to emphasize on that X-ray computed tomography, because we will see the system upstairs, this is an example of a collaborative work that we do with our colleagues at the University of Nottingham. Based on, you are familiar with this system if you have any fractured bone when you go to the medical examination. So we use a very similar system, but our system has much better resolution because we are interested to look at details of the root system and how this root system in different environment is coping with the stress. For example, in this case, we are looking at nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers and innovation on fertilizer technology that can create a differential root response or root system architecture. By understanding that architecture, we can design improved crops in the future. The importance of this system is twofold, is non-destructive. So we don't need to take the plants out. In the past, even 10 years ago, we didn't have this technology. We had to go and destructively bring the plants, and by damaging the structure of the root, we lose a lot of information. But this is non-destructive, and it's 3D and 4D. So 3D is the X, Y, Z, and fourth dimension is the time. We can do it over time repeatedly to understand the dynamics of the changes in root system. What is the real application of this in the real world? The example that you see here is from Eyre Peninsula. It's a very, very important grains production systems in South Australia. And the photo on the left is a typical farmer practice. This is a crop that the farmer can achieve in terms of production. And this soil is one of the most difficult soils in the world to farm on. South Australian soils are known as calcareous soils. They have very high level of calcium carbonate and high pH, which makes that environment a little bit unpleasant for the crops to grow. The new technology that we produce, and in this example, we developed a very interesting phosphorus fertilizer to contribute to the P nutrition or to phosphorus nutrition of the plant, enabled us to increase the productivity, as you can see by the data on the right-hand side, by 45%. So the data that you see on the right-hand side is grain yield at the time of harvest, ton per hectare. Compared to typical farmer practice, the technology that we introduced in those environments transformed the landscape. If I want to put it into the context again, in the last 20 years, the best agronomy practices, including the use of agrochemicals, varieties, and improvement in the water use efficiency in Australia, achieved between 5 to 7% improvement in productivity. The innovation that we are now designing at the University of Adelaide is a step change improvement that pushed those frontiers up to 30 to 45%. And these are a one-off applications with residual impact over many years. What success may look like. So this is another example of the work that my team has been leading. This is from New South Wales. Again, a very important crop growing region. And we would like to bring innovation to improve that climate smart agriculture dimensions by having a sustainable farming production. The crops that you can see again in this image is a typical farmer practice on the left-hand side versus an improved canola production on the same paddock where we ameliorated that soil and subsoil. So the focus of our research is on the subsoil, and by having access to precise high throughput imaging systems and also X-ray computed tomography, when we understand the science of the work, it enables us to design solutions for the future farming systems. So if you join us to go upstairs, we will demonstrate to you some of those capability and the state-of-art facility that we have. Once again, welcome to the Plant Accelerator. Now this is the real building, right? This particular area, we call it a smart house. Why is it called a smart house? There are a number of different reasons for it. In the past, in traditional approach to plant and soil science, and during my own PhD time and when I was doing my research 10 years ago, everything was manual. We had to do handling of the pots from one location to other. A typical research project on a daily basis, we couldn't handle more than 40 or 50 pots, and it was very time consuming. For example, if we wanted to look at the development of plant leaf area, we had to use ruler, or we had to use very traditional approaches to quantify the changes in different plants. University of Adelaide and Australian Plant Phenomic Network has established a state-of-art facility like what you can see here, and this is one of the very few in the world enable us to have a robotic system. So this is a conveyor belt system that the pots can move from the glasshouse area, come into this chamber, and inside this chamber we've got a number of different imaging platforms. We've got RGB cameras, and we've got also NIR and hyperspectral cameras, allowing us not only look at the overall dynamics of plant growth, but we can use different spectrums of the light to look at water use, nutrient uptake, and some other structural properties within the plant which is important for us. this hasn't been available in the past. Precision is number one, and it is non-destructive. So I no longer need to take a leaf out to go and measure it. Everything captured within there. And as the pots are coming out of the chamber, automatically they can be weighed on the scale there, and the amount of water that needs to be added will be calculated. There's an automatic watering system, and they will be returned to the station where they belong to. We can achieve this data capturing on a daily basis. It wasn't possible in the past to achieve any of these things. So what happens in plant breeding, for example, we will use this phenotyping data. So this process called phenotyping. Phenotype is what you can see in morphology of the plant. And we can compare hundreds of different plants and varieties to identify why some of these plants performing better than the others. And then we can go deep into their profile of DNA and RNA and bring them into breeding program and come up with new enhanced varieties of the plants that can be resistant or tolerate to drought, to salinity, to a harsh condition, for example, when the soil compaction or waterlogged condition is there. And that really scale and precision is important for us. So if you join me to go to the next room, we will have a bit of more discussion about how the smart house looks like. So in that room, we talked about precision, imaging system, and how we can use those as data capturing. There is one more important parameter here, and that parameter is throughput. In plant breeding, we need a high throughput system. If you remember, I mentioned about how many pots per day we could process when we didn't have this capability. Is about 100 pots in a research project. Within this infrastructure that we have, on a daily basis, we can look at 2,400 pots. So we've got 4 of these rooms, and each room can accommodate 600 pots. And that's really important because we need to speed up the breeding program or speed up the capturing of the data that is responsible for a healthy crop compared to an unhealthy crop of similar genetic. And then we can zoom in into those important features that those and traits, physiological traits that this crop might have, enabling us to improve the breeding or improving those farming conditions. So the infrastructure at the plant accelerator is significant. From the robotic point of view, it is basically minimizing the human's handling and the throughput and the precision. And we also underlie this. There is a massive data crunching approach that we use AI and machine learning approaches to understand the massive amount of data that now we have access to analyze on a daily basis, and then we improve the improvements of crops and soil conditions in the future. So dynamic understanding of a system which wasn't possible in the past by the naked eye, and now we are equipped that with technologies such as imaging and robotics. So what we discussed here so far is in the smart house is in relation to the above ground biomass. So we can look at the shoots. We can look at, for example, a parameter which could be the angle of the leaf. Why the angle of the leaf is important? When the sunlight comes in and hit the leaf at different direction, it affects the way that the crop is controlling its photosynthesis. Well, some crops have a leaf angle of like that, some crop like that, and it's very important for us to understand that and quantify that. Above ground biomass. When we go to the next room, it's where the X-ray computed tomography system is. And that system is designed to look at things that are hidden either below the surface. For example, I showed you some of those root-soil interactions, or also for some of the work that Mia will be explaining in relation to seeds within a spike systems and how this is enabling us to achieve remarkable data set that can help us for designing better systems in the future. So if you join me to go to the next door, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, or we can answer the questions at the end.
When is this system being built?
So the plant accelerator was designed in 2012. For 15 years it's been here, but it's gone under a number of upgrade and transformation, and we added more capability. For example, the X-ray computed tomography system came here about 2 years ago, I think, and we are keep trying to update it over with the infrastructure that government helped us to add, and the University of Adelaide contribution as well, of course. So this is part of Australian Plant Phenomic Network. We've got co-located partners in different universities. ANU, for example, Charles Estate University and La Trobe University. The informations are in the booklet downstairs if you're interested to have a look further. And each node has different capabilities, so it's complementary to each other. So please join me to go to the next one. What you can see behind me is one of our instruments that I discussed in relation to X-ray computed tomography, or X-ray CT for abbreviation. It is very similar to a medical CT system, but what we are interested in is resolution and high throughput. So again, we've got a conveyor belt system here that enables us to run the systems automatically. It goes inside this chamber, and the resolution that enable us to look at things at fine scales. In this system, we are dealing with about 80 micrometer of resolution, and there are also instruments that we can add modules and improve detection that can bring us to nanometer scale. And I will ask Mia to explain some of the excellent work that she has been doing in relation to X-ray computed tomography.
Thank you very much. So this is the HUCT system at the Park Accelerator. So basically this machine was acquired about close to 3 years ago now, and we've been using it to run high throughput spike phenotyping almost on daily basis. What I mean by high throughput spike phenotyping is if you look at a weak spike like this, so you've been wondering, say, how many varieties do I actually have in this spike? So because in agriculture, we always want to increase the yield. And the only way to do it without the X-ray machine is by peeling off the husks. You need to get the grains out, count them, measure them. You want to weigh them. You want to know the length of the individual grains. But that's a very time-consuming procedure. And you couldn't really deal with, like, say, thousands of samples per day. But with a machine like this, because X-ray is almost like a see-through technology, so if we send through a spike into the machine, and during the 7 minutes of the scanning time, we can apply about 100 pictures. And from that 100 pictures, our computer is going to reconstruct into a 3D volume file. And from that 3D volume file, we can do all kinds of measurements without destroying your spike. So not only can we measure grain traits like weight, volume, surface area, density, length, we can also understand the 3D position of the individual grains on a spike, which means, because there's like more and more research start to showing, maybe grains coming from different regions of the spike, they might have different micronutrition to it. But if you have to take the spikes apart, we kind of lose that 3D information of the position of the grain. So with this machine, we can apply the 3D information together with all the morphological trace measurements. So this is an example, like what you're gonna see. Like this is how the spike and brain looks like after X-ray CT scan. So it's all like a brief scale picture. And then we can do individual grain identification. So it's almost like you click on the grain, it's gonna tell you all the dimension of this grain, and also if you want to say take this grain to a ICP-MS, if you want to measure some nutrition information from it, that's all doable. We also use this machine for underground. So as I was saying, study roots can be very difficult. So my PhD work was on a body root development, and I was not fortunate enough to have an X-ray machine with me during that time, which means I have to basically sacrifice a batch of my experiment material each week by taking them off from the soil, kill them, wash the soil away, and then measure the root traits from it. But that way, first, you lose your plot, and you don't have the 3D root architecture information, and you're gonna damage your plots. So with the X-ray CT machine, we can kind of do a time series on the same plants over time,
you can kind of measure like how does the root behave, how does the growth look like throughout the time. And also you can put your plants into different texture of soils with different nutrition profile to see if there's any difference in root soil interaction. You can even say, like, say, put two plants together and see with the root system of the two different plants, do they interact or do they kind of compete with each other in a way? So all this kind of information is hidden underground, and we want to have a way to actually see it without destroying the sample. And X-ray CT is a really good example of it.
Thank you very much. Just one more fun thing. Do you know what this is? Macadamia, exactly. So just to give you a fun example, it's not fun, it's actually a serious business that have used computed tomography for this work. One of my colleagues, Kerry, the business manager of the Plant Accelerator, has been discussing issues in relation to macadamia with a macadamia breeder at the University of Queensland. One of the problems that they have is that macadamia is split into 2 or 3 sections inside the shell, and it affects the premium market that, for example, when you want to sell it, people prefer to have. And by using X-ray tomography, we can actually identify which plants and which varieties and what controlling under what conditions that the split can happen, and enhancing the genetic productivity of the macadamia trees, which is quite important. So with naked eyes or destructively, you have to open this shell, which might affect the integrity of the actual fruit inside this. So there are many different applications for X-ray computed tomography, and this is a very fast-growing technology area as well. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, and I think there is also about 2 or 3 minutes left before we can go back to the foyer, but happy to answer any questions. No. So in terms of the dose of X-ray that comes to the plant, it's negligible, the amount of X-ray that hit the plants. It doesn't affect it, and we are not eating anything out of it. So this is just for science and for data capturing. But in terms of, it's similar for you to go to a dentist and get an OPG of your teeth, for example. So it's negligible. It's absolutely bare minimum.
Exactly how long your sample stays in the X-ray chamber and how much X-ray beams we emitted to the samples. You can, just like a calculation on the linear equations, you can work out how much radiation the sample actually get exposed to. And it's like a general stem note, like if it's above a threshold, we might be taking some risks, but if it's below any certain threshold, we think it's pretty good to go.
Thank you very much. So please join me to go to the foyer and return to the Airbury house. Thank you. Thank you.